Dr. Ira W. Harvey was tasked with conducting a feasibility study for the ability to form an independent City of Calera school system. The following video is his complete presentation that was presented to the Calera City Council on Monday, June 3rd. We have also uploaded his complete report to our website. A link for the report can be found in the video description as well.
You wish me to begin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Those of you who are seated a little bit more distant from a screen, I'm going to be using a PowerPoint a great deal, and if you feel like you want to reposition yourself so you can see what we're doing and talking about, I think that'll be very helpful to you. First of all, First of all, we are taking a look at all of the parameters that are involved in the financial feasibility of creating a public school system for the city of Calera. All we can do is take a financial snapshot of the resources and the conditions that would prevail if the decision had been made and the school system was created for this fiscal year. Please keep in mind, we are in fiscal year 23-24. On October the 1st, fiscal year 24-25 will begin. A school system cannot be started during that fiscal year due to time limitations. So the first year of operation would be for legislative appropriations for fiscal year 2025-26. So we are thinking about something that is significantly in the future. In terms of a short time frame, no, it's a little bit longer time frame. Are there any things that come up about the city of Calera, its inhabitants, its tax structure, the age of its citizens, the number of kids that may need special education services, demographics? Yes, we're going to take a look at that. The study is long. I apologize to you. But there are so many issues, and every year that goes by, with the good blessings of the legislature, things get a little bit more complicated. Just like everything else in operating city government, I'm sure. So there are 7 chapters outlined for specific discussions of categories of variables that are important. The first is the origin of laws governing public education in Alabama. None of you may be interested in that. But there is a reason. From 1819 to the present day, we started with 16 section lands to individual townships. In 1854, we coalesced those into county school systems unless there was a municipal school system formed, or city. But the intent always was, by action of the legislature, that down the road, every municipality that reached the threshold of first 2,500 people population, or today 5,000 population, they would automatically become a city school system. If you choose not to, by statute, you have to pass a city council resolution saying we don't want to do this. And the County Board of Education has got to say, and by resolution, we see your resolution, if we accept it, we're supposed to stay one. So the default is 16 sections go back to municipalities, which are basically the logical logical endpoint of the 16 section lands. Okay, all of that said, there's just a little bit about that. One other interesting point. Since 1875, we've had a constitutional provision that said the legislature cannot go and pass a local law telling you what you've got to do with your local Board of Education. It's prohibited in the Constitution. Disclaimer. Not everybody always pays attention to the Constitution, and in my view it was violated with what has happened in 2 bills in Wallen County the distribution of sales tax money countywide, and making a municipality pay for every school building of the county that is in their municipality. The argument is very simple. You get the property. You get the buses that serve the school sites. Simply why? It all originated with the 16th section land grants, and you have been paying taxes all of these years to the county to pay for those schools. So you get that property. That is standard operating procedure. That's what we're trying to do in that chapter. Demographics and government establishing a school system. I'll lay out all the pertinent laws, rules, and regulations and how this is accomplished if you make the decision to do it. Now, does anybody pay attention to the law that says you should have passed a resolution that you did not want to do it when you reached 5,000? No. As a former president of UAB once told me, all those laws are so old nobody pays attention to them anymore. Well, they're on the books, and they do have statutory authority, but you're guaranteed the right. Demographics, we're going to take a look at that. Types of financial aid formulas that the state offers. What resources in 5 would be available from the Shelby County taxes for public schools? What kind of revenues in 6 would be available to the proposed Calera City school system? And in Chapter 7, a summary and how does it look? Point. I am not in favor of you separating. I am not in favor of you not separating. That is your political decision. It is left by law to your city council to decide. So I take no position or no side. I want to be as neutral as I can in this discussion. Then, of course, a bibliography and umpteen appendices. Now let me say one more thing about this. This is a handbook that if you were to want to do this, practically everything that your new Board of Education would need to have a factual basis for and a reference for, your new superintendent, chief school finance officer, technology coordinator, etc., 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 what they need to know, and to carry it to the extreme, as I found in many of the studies that I've done, bond attorneys have said, thank you, Ira, for laying out exactly how the taxes are levied, collected, when they're to expire, and what can be done with it. So there's a lot of material there. We're going to cover it very quickly. What is the student population to be served? A very critical issue. By law, you are required, if you form a city board of education, to serve every resident of school age in the city of Calera. Are you required to serve any students from outside the city boundaries of Calera? The answer is no. May you serve outside the city limits of Calera? Yes. That is a Board of Education decision. That is one of those variables that I cannot know, you cannot know, until the issue is further investigated and you have an absolute database of how many school-aged children actually reside in the city limits of the city of Calera. What about kids that are attending from outside the city boundaries who are actually enrolled in those schools now? That's a decision your city Board of Education could make. They could be grandfathered in and allowed to finish their academic program in that school site, or, as in some separation agreements, they could be allowed to stay until they finish the 12th grade. Who makes that decision? The separation agreement, which will be created and driven by your city Board of Education if you choose to make that additional step. Taxes, we're going to look at that. What are the relevant characteristics of the population of Calera? Well, for example, would it cost more to start up a city school system if there are an awful lot of young people living there? and more coming every day. Yeah. Does it make a difference if you have a high percentage of elderly population? Yeah. Elderly people tend to be very conservative and very distrustful of any idea of a tax increase if revenues were needed. The older I get, the more likely I am to vote no, and let's just forget about it. If you have well, let's use this example. Suppose you have a family of 4 and you have an income, let's say $75,000 a year for those 4. You're going to be living fairly okay. But what if you were a family of 6 and you've got to spread that money over more kids? Then suddenly your family wealth per child decreases. That's the difficulty we run into when we take a look at how schools are financed. Your revenues are going to be relatively fixed. Yes, you will get state money for every child. You will get county-wide share of money for every child. You will get federal money for every child that's eligible. But the school tax district, there are two types of taxes, ad valorem taxes. County-wide, which is all of Shelby County, and you've been paying into that for years. Part of it's coming back to your school sites. And district taxes. They're very different. Every county must have at least 2 school systems to have a district tax. Years and years ago, there were 2 districts, 1 and 2 in Shelby County. Now there's just District 2. You've got Pelham and Alabaster, part of Hoover, part of Vestavia, part of Leeds, part of Birmingham. But if you make the decision to form, your city limits will comprise a new taxing jurisdiction. And that's the school tax district ad valorem tax. Good news, ladies and gentlemen. Shelby County levies 16 mills of ad valorem taxes countywide. The district tax is levied and collected, and you're paying it. You're paying it to the county Board of Education right now, but Pelham and Alabaster are collecting it within their municipal boundaries, and they keep it for the respective Board of Education. So that's 14 mills. That's 30 mills. That is a very high ad valorem tax base. It is not representative of Alabama. You can compare yourselves, if you wish, to a few places like Vestavia, Mountain Brook, Hoover. There are a few of them which have those high tax rates. You could also compare yourself to Chilton County. What is their total tax rate there in mills? 10. Are the schools in Chilton County well funded? No. Do you have city municipal boundaries in Chilton County? Yes, you do. When you have to serve the 147 identified children who live in Chilton County within the city limits of Calera in your school system? Yes. Are they in the schools now? No. We'll have a slide a little bit later, or there's in the report that will show you where they're scattered all over Chilton County. What did I just say, though? They're very low tax rate. So the yield by tax rate of resources that you will get from the City of Calera School Tax District in Chilton County is going to be very meager, incredibly small. Will you get a share of countywide tax from Chilton County? Yeah, you'll get a little bit of that, but it's very small money. So what is happening here is, in addition to the Chilton County area being a very low tax rate, it is also extremely low property tax value. You are very fortunate, as was Pelham, as was Alabaster when we did the study for them, to be guaranteed tax proceeds from a very high property wealth area and, by the same token, a very high sales tax wealth area. So you will be benefiting from everything that's gone on in Shelby County for your share of countywide 16 mills and countywide sales tax and other excise, franchise, and privilege license taxes that are levied for a school within the county. So you've got a big step up. Now what's going to be difficult for me to deal with, and already I'm taking a lot more time than I planned to, but I'm trying now to adjust, and we're actually going ahead to some of the slides and working in, just work it in, because the old saying used to be, education finance is like a Russian novel. It's long, it's boring, and in the end, everybody dies. Well, that's kind of what discussing these issues is like, but please stay with me. I'll try to be as clear as I can. Okay? Other considerations, we'll skip that, we'll skip that. 16th section we've talked about, chapter 1 we've talked about. We are at 5,000 as the critical population to trigger the statutory guarantee that you can have a city school system. It's not, it would take an act of the legislature that has general application statewide to change that number either up or down. Now, are all political leaders happy with that situation? No. That's why I have to go to such extreme in a study to try to evaluate every potential variable there if you decide, your city council, to create a city board of education. There are going to be a lot of naysayers. There are going to be people who say you can't afford it, you can't do it, you're too small. Legislation surfaced for a couple of decades to raise that number to 10 to 15,000 because city boards of education drain county resources. That actually is not a fair statement. The county will still get all of the money for the kids that it has. You, by forming a city board of education, on the other hand, undertake an additional financial obligation. There's no other way to say it. But that is the leverage that a city has. You have virtual home rule on taxes you can levy at what rate, except for ad valorem taxes. And you can make decisions, and you can, by city council action, assist in the funding of a city school system. County Board of Education doesn't have that possibility. They can't go to the county commission. The county commission doesn't have direct taxing authority, as a city does. All right? Would you be inopportune if the legislature next year raises the threshold to 15 or 30,000? Yeah. It's off the table as something being available for you. 40 years after the 1995 equity funding lawsuit and legislation that was passed and new funding mechanisms to hopefully achieve greater equity, and we were successful in doing that. That issue is back being discussed by the legislature. There is a joint legislative committee of the House and Senate studying a massive overhaul of education funding. And they are to get a report and probably introduce legislation next year. Thought question. What do we use as the single one variable to measure financial ability of a municipality to operate a school system? Ad valorem tax revenues, the yield of one meal divided by the number of students. You get wealthier if you have more assessed valuation yielding more revenues on the district tax, which would be how many meals in the city of Calera in Shelby County? Anybody want to try it? 14. You would automatically be guaranteed whatever the county-wide district meal is, District 2, you inherit that same rate. In the city of Calera, in Chilton County, the rate is 5 meals. Okay, so that's the inheritance, it's the automatic situation that occurs. Well, one of the legislative ideas is to say, we're going to set a standard for how much per capita income you should have. Because you need more income, you've got to be fairly wealthy to have your school system. Can a municipality levy an income tax? No. Can a county? No. It's prohibited by Constitution only to the state of Alabama. So why should you try to measure wealth based on a tax that you can't levy and collect anyway? So, point I'm leaving you with here. The single measure of your financial ability is how much money you would receive from the district tax that would be created Calera in Shelby, Calera in Chilton, and your share of the countywide taxes based on ADM ratio. In other words, if you have 147 kids living in Chilton County, what percent or ratio is that of the total population? Well, if it's 2%, you get 2% of the money. It's that simple. The more kids you have, the more your money has to be spread out. The fewer you have, you lose economy of scale. You don't have enough children in schools to make the operation of the schools viable. So right now you're kind of in the sweet spot on that. There doesn't seem to be a problem one way or the other. Okay, so we define a city. We do exactly what we talked about here, so I'm going to flip on through this. If you decide by city council action to form a board of education, there will be 5 members appointed to staggered terms. That's by state law. Could there be alternatives like holding election by districts in the future? Yes. But right now, whatever happens, if you make the decision to form a board, that's what's got to happen. Please get this straight. The fact that your city council could create a city board of education does not mean you have separated from the county. It simply means you have filed for divorce. You've created a legal authority to represent the interests of the citizens of Calera, and then you begin the process of negotiation in a divorce settlement. For what do you get? What do they get? What have you got to pay for costs that they're going to push off on you, etc., etc., etc. So step number 1, you can form a board of education, but that doesn't mean you're a separate board with any control over schools. What it does mean is that board has legal authority to accept city council appropriations and hire such staff as may be necessary to plan and get ready for a separation agreement in the future. Separation would be following the historical conditions of how these are done. You would get control of the schools July the 1st, 2025, if everything were to work out. We'll talk about in a few minutes the financial liabilities that come with that. If you form a board, are you obligated to proceed to separation? No. If you never negotiate and get signatures from your board and from Shelby County and the state superintendent, you never become a separate city school system. You never receive state, federal, or local tax dollars until there is a contract of separation. That's a catch-22 now, because you form the board, you cannot get any money until October the 1st, well actually, let's say the 22nd to the 24th of 2024-25. So a board that is formed, and that's the way it's been done for the last 50 years, has to be funded by city council appropriations and or revenue increases that are dedicated for this purpose. You can back out at any point. It's a reversible deal. Last point. If you do achieve financial separation, can we go that far? Are you obligated to stay that way forever? And the answer is no. By law, your city board could vote to turn the schools back over to the county, and they have to take them. So this is not a one-way street. This is a two-way street, and it's proposed school board that we're talking about, and there are many outs if it turns out to be something that you don't want to do. All right? Problem. You've got very ragged city limits. And as Seth will tell you, the first time I talked with y'all, that was one of the things I wanted to see right away from what I'd been gathering from the maps. Gee, that poses a problem. Which children are you going to let attend? Just the ones in the city? Well, they'll be the only ones paying the school tax district and the Lawrence tax. The ones outside the city won't be paying that tax, which means that whatever taxes your citizens produce for the school board, it's got to be spread up among resident and non-resident students. The more non-resident students, it dilutes your resources. But if you have too few students, it's just almost as bad because you don't have an economy of scale. You're in a sweet spot except for that very ragged. Okay, negative point. Positive point. You have annexed high property tax wealth, class 2 business property, assessed at 20% of its fair market value. If you had all farms, it would only be at 10%. And if you could build a nuclear power plant here, it'd be 30%. Or Alabama Power, God help us, build another coal-fired plant here, which I don't think is on the horizon. So, looking at the blend of classes of property, Shelby County comes out way ahead because there's so much commercial property. You would be getting tax revenues from a countywide tax from what has happened in Pelham, Alabaster, Hoover, Chelsea, Helena, Columbiana, everywhere, where property values have risen. This is a difficult thing to understand, so let me try to do this right now. I'm having to ad-lib as we go because I feel like there's only so much of this revival meeting that y'all could stand. I grew up going to the Methodist church in the country and with the fans from the local funeral parlor and just said, oh dear Lord, please let me be sick and not have to go. All right. Given the circumstances, the evaluation of the blend of property within Calera is not quite as favorable as Shelby County overall, but it's within very close distance. Here's the other side now of the equation. when calculations are made by the two main state funding programs, the 1995 Foundation Program and the 1995 Capital Purchase Program. They operate as equalization. They say each local school system, like for the Foundation Program, you provide 10 mills or its tax base equivalent of school tax district ad valorem. And we're going to subtract that from the cost of the Foundation Program, and then the state is going to give you the remainder of the money necessary to operate it. What happens as you become poorer? The state pays a larger share. If you become richer, then your local share goes up and the state share goes down. Right now, by being a little bit poorer than the county as a whole on property tax values, you get an offset by being charged required local effort that's less than that on average in Shelby County. Chilton County helps you a little bit more because that's an even poorer area. If it were a super wealthy area, your required local effort, 10 mills or tax base equivalent, would go up higher. So, given everything together, that's what the calculations get to in a later chapter, and we'll come to those in just a moment, but let me now continue. Police jurisdiction. What if your city limits were police jurisdiction? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. That's your political decision. But would a family who's living in the police jurisdiction and paying sales tax feel like that they had some right to the Calera City school system? I don't know. But that is a very difficult issue. You're talking about planning and zoning. This is the key component of that. Ideally, I'd like to see a city with a nice circle. And think about it with me now. If you were to do a school transportation program, another issue. Only your Board of Education can decide if you're going to continue to run buses and bring kids to the school sites. Do you have to do it? No. Do you have to provide special ed transportation? Yes, that's another separate category. But general school transportation? No. Who's going to make that decision? Only your city Board of Education, if formed by resolution and written in the minutes as approved. You've got to have an entire policy manual developed. So that, how can I tell you how much transportation is going to cost? I can't. I can give you a swag based on cities with similar population, how much it's costing them. But again, city council action determines how much it is. Okay, we talked about population growth. You are one of the fastest growing areas in the county. Is that good or bad? Depends on how you make measurements. It's good if you're bringing in high wealth class 2 or class 3 property. Business, for example. It's not so good if you're bringing in a lot of apartment buildings. They are class 2, but they're high density. And like in Hoover, there tends to be an awful lot of kids who are able to attend Hoover School because they're renting an apartment inside the city limits of Hoover. That's another planning and zoning issue that goes with the city council's responsibility. So, the city council and the city board of education would make decisions that either complement or adversely impact each other for the future, and they would have to be widely discussed and resolved as to, is that a good or bad thing? Generally, the red arrow shows that you do have a fairly good population, 5 to 9 years and 10 to 14. Then you have a high population in, say, 30 to 45 years. That's ideal. Those are people who are living here, have jobs, making money, and produce more tax revenue than they consume. You don't have a lot of old people here. What'd you do with them? Have they all moved away? That is a very positive thing because elderly have greater demands for city services, particularly fire and ambulance rescue, and so forth and so on. Plus, they tend to be very negative toward taxes. All right, so are demographics an issue? No. I do not see any problem with demographics. And we talk about English, just examples of other things we looked at. English as a language, medium house income, ADM in your school sites. By the way, the number of kids attending your school sites have nothing to do with the kids who live in Calera. It has to do with the transportation zone that Shelby County has created. So these are not all resident students. Condition of the school sites. I've said that Shelby County is a high resource county for taxation. Generally, the reports which are printed in detail for each school site in this manual are very favorable compared to statewide conditions of schools. I know that individuals of you may have particular things that you've identified that you wish could do better. But frankly, Shelby County has probably been an above-average steward of resources and spreading it to all school sites of the county. Question, ladies and gentlemen. In your current status, is the Shelby County Board of Education required to fairly share local tax revenues for instructional purposes and capital outlay? No. It's a political decision. If you were a city Board of Education, would you be guaranteed that your board would get their proportionate share of all the countywide resources? The answer is yes. So I have run across many times, like Fairhope, and they finally passed a 5 mil property tax but decided not to separate. Think about this. If the city of Calera passed a 5 mil property tax, city tax, dedicated it to the school sites, would that be a good thing? Probably yes. But what can the Shelby County Board of Education do? Oh, well now you have this $1 million coming in. We don't have to share with you as much of our countywide revenues coming in. So there is this distinct advantage of accountability and autonomy that a city board has that a county does not guarantee the school sites within a community. Debt. Is there debt to be assumed? Yeah. About $30 million of debt on buildings that have been constructed over the years here. Would you inherit that debt? Yes. You're going to inherit your share of the district tax, and the district tax is the one that's usually pledged for the payment of, they're not bonds, they're warrants. And that's another story that's described in there. School warrants are like bonds. They act just like a bond, but they're not a bond, therefore they're legal. The County Board of Education vote. That is not a significant debt. The amortization tables for every debt issue of the Shelby County regarding school sites here is in the document, and a full amortization schedule of every debt that exists on school buses. Good news is every bus will be paid off in the next 3 years, and it's not a great deal of money. Chapter 6. Student attendance, well, we don't know. I've talked about that. So, we had to come up with a number of how many children could be served by law in the municipality of Calera, city of Calera. Well, the State Department of Education has a statewide student database that theoretically has the exact address, and not by zip code, but actually, do they live inside a city boundary or do they live outside? That data is submitted almost daily by the Shelby County Board of Education to the State Department of Education. It's updated constantly. So why wouldn't what the department has as a number set be the same thing as what Shelby County has as a number set? I cannot answer that question, but they differ. So we tried to make the best adjustment we could, and we came up with we could probably have 3,273 students. And we took away the 337 that are in unincorporated areas. We found at least 105 students that are reported to be in virtual learning but live within the city of Calera. Question: if they want to come to your city schools, do you have to let them? Yeah. They have an entitlement. They're a resident. Are they going to want to come? I don't know. Well, how do you plan a budget if you don't know who's coming? You don't. No. And you have to make the best adjustments you can. And the interim period that a board is operating, if it's created, before final separation, you have appointed an attendance officer, and you are running a cross-check between actual property tax by residents and students by residents, and call exactly the ones who live within your community. I can't do that. I have no legal authority to ask those questions, nor can I find out how many special ed kids by unique disability that there are. That's private information. I can't do that. Can a Calera City Board do it? Absolutely. And their people that they appoint, a superintendent, an attendance officer, yeah, those are the things that you can find out. You get to belong to the Alabama Association of School Boards, and a superintendent that you would hire belongs to the school administrators, SSA, School Superintendents of Alabama. They have an insight, plus you have direct liaison with the State Department of Education. So there are things that you can get to find out that I, as an outside citizen, simply cannot do. So we also found that there is reported to be 54 students who live in Calera but are attending school in Alabaster and Pelham. I don't know. I have to assume the state's got the records, and Pelham and Alabaster have reported those to the state. Will those kids come to schools here? I don't know. And lastly, we get the net 3,126. We take the Shelby County 147. We came up with a number of 3,273. That's virtually what you have right now, but that's assuming that virtual students and the students that are attending other municipalities would also exercise their required attendance, their accessibility to your school system. Okay, moving on along. Oh. James, I don't know this one. I got it fine. No, it's a joke. I've done this so many years. I have mine, and I know right when my finger's in the right place. If I don't look at this finger at the right place. State law requires that teacher units, which are the basis, the currency of the foundation program, has to be placed where they are earned by school site. based on prior year ADM, based on grade that each of those children are in, because there are different divisors or weights for each grade. The legislature is being seduced by the idea that we don't need to do that anymore. We just need to give a flat dollar amount and let the local schools decide how they're going to spend it and where they're going to spend it. This is accountability if we guarantee you a divisor of 14.5 for first grade at school site, Calera Elementary. It doesn't matter whether it's your board governing it or the Shelby County board that's governing. That's what's got to happen. If you get unrestricted revenues, that means your board decides which school, which grade, which program do they want to spend the money on. And if they want to get rid of a few teachers in kindergarten and first grade, they can do it. With the current program, you cannot do it. And there's at least 20 employees currently funded from local funds, because Shelby County has to put all of the foundation money, including the state share and the local share, in each individual school site where earned. So you've got accountability and guarantee that the money is being properly used. Teacher units are expensive, over $100,000 a piece, and the percent of salary is like 38 to 37%. Compensation is expensive. What is a motivation for individuals to take a part-time job as school bus driver? Get health insurance. So that is a very important aspect of our state program, by providing these fringe benefits and a guaranteed minimum state salary schedule. Okay, you pay 54 mills in Calera. There are general authorizations for municipal ad valorem taxes. You pay 10 within the city. You pay a total of 9% of sales use tax. And your flexibility to levy collect taxes at any rate is the advantage of your municipality. Now, quickly, equalization formulas say that we're designing how much money we think should be in Calera Elementary School. That's easy. The hard part is, who's going to pay for it? How much of your local taxes would be required to do that? That's required local effort. And how much of it will come from the state? Politicians will find it much more convenient to increase the allocation plan dollar amount and say, look what wonderful thing we've done. But you're going to have to not put in 10 mills anymore, you're going to put in 15 or 20. So you shift the cost burden to help pay for what should have been a state function. That will be a critical issue in the next legislative session as well. I'm going to skip over this because I've just let me do this one. The divisor for this year, current year, we're in 14.25 to 1, K through 3. But that includes funding for special needs children and career technical education. There is statutorily required, statutorily required that 5% of the students be special ed kids, and they require 2.5 times per child expenditure that does a regular education child. And you've got to take some of those 14.25 teacher units and pull them out and have them teach a special ed class. If your board decides to form, it's going to be very important that they get to understand this very quickly. Because the net effect is, after you pull out 11.11% of the teacher units for special ed purposes, your class size is 16 to 1. This is one of the gripes I have with the current foundation program, which I wrote in 1995, the first step, because it's what Governor Fob James wanted. He wouldn't consider our next two formulas, which included weights and external to divisors add-ons for special ed and career tech. But anyway, all right, I'm going to kind of flip on ahead. You should plan to offer the same salary schedule that is the state minimum and whatever Shelby County gives as an additional supplement to the state salary schedule. It will probably be in your separation agreement that the board will have to design a salary schedule for every professional and support employee. We've kind of talked about this. Here's good news for you. The child count of children with exceptionalities. Total disabilities is the word that is used in IDEA, the federal program, Individual with Disabilities Education Act. There are 13 of them. Shelby County has 13.87% of total student population in that category. I got the wrong one again. I'm sorry. Let me go back. The state average is 13.87%. The Shelby County is 13.68%, about the same. So there is not an overburden of special ed, most likely, in your schools. The neat thing about being in Shelby County, gifted are a separate category by state law. 27.83% of students in Shelby County are said to be gifted. Only 21.47% in the state. So I take special ed off of the issue of you having an overburden of special education needs in Calera. All right, I'm going to skip the line item appropriations to the State Department of Education that you'll get your share of. And if you'll notice, we do provide extra money for advanced placement, Children's First Trust Fund for the disabilities, English language learners, that's a disability, gifted students, which is an exceptionality here, high needs special education, high school academic and financial improvement, school-based mental health, special ed behavior analysis, and deaf hearing preschool special ed. We do fund a lot of those things. I can't tell you how much of that money you would get this year because I have no way of knowing how many eligible students that there were. So I have been forced to understate a little bit your state appropriation. Okay, we've talked about AD ratio. If you farm, the state superintendent will say Calera City Schools deserves a certain percent of all countywide revenues. He sends this letter to your county tax collector, and that's the amount that they have to, the rate they have to distribute. The same thing will go to Chilton County. So those are guaranteed. Good thing about Shelby County is they're very low on administrative services costs, only 2.06%, whereas all public school systems in the state are at 3.8%. Chilton County, we've talked about it, 10. You are up here in the upper right at the blue arrow, and your city limits will be the tax district in that county. And we've talked about the respective rates. And let's go down now to what you can expect here. Expected ad valorem revenues from Chilton County. $12 million from the 16 mil countywide ad valorem tax would be your earnings based on the 3273 count in students. Then non-ad valorem revenues, mainly driven by the county sales tax, you could expect another 2.3 million. And all sorts of other revenues, which are too many to go over, another 3 million. So if we add it up, all in all, you should get state appropriation in the 20 million range. You should get $16+ million from county revenues, and you would get the yield of your school tax district, Shelby County Children, Calera, Shelby, Calera, Chilton. And we'll give you your aggregate number set. And we've discovered that y'all are making contributions on behalf of these school sites, but they're not shown in the budget. Theoretically, according to GASB, generally accepted accounting principles, it should be. But I give this to you right here. This $2.7 million you're showing for 23 of on-behalf contributions. If that were put in a city council appropriation to your city board, rather than you just paying for it and Shelby County not recognizing it in the books, your local revenues will increase fairly significantly. 147 kids we've talked about. Total ad valorem revenues from Chilton County, $52,000. That is not much money, but that's your ADM ratio against a very weak millage rate and a very weak tax base. $341,000. Chilton County schools would not exist without sales tax money. And I go on and on and on. I'm wearing all of y'all out. Debt to be assumed. Is it excessive debt load? Yes. It's not excessive, but yes, it is a little bit greater per student than Shelby County is paying. Caveat. If you decide to create a city board, one of the things in plotting what your future enrollment may be, will you run into the need for a issuance of debt to build new classroom space? That's only your board is able to make that kind of assumption, because they will decide how many kids are going to attend. We'll have predictions, demographics of growth, and you'll have an idea of what's coming in the future. Conclusions. Shelby County has about 15.8 thousand per kid in revenues, federal, state, local, and we're predicting about 13,790 for what is shown for this number of students, 3273, by the formulas that are in existence, and they're all in the document. So you're short. You will not have the same resources. And the big part of that is the city of Calera assessed valuation, the value of a meal per student is less here than it is countywide. The counter of that is you have lower cost housing, which makes it more possible for people to live here and have families. So what can I say about that? Well, I can make some adjustments. You're going to benefit on the chargeback, require local effort. Some other monies, I think probably you're about $1,000 per kid short of having the same resources. Now the moral decision that comes, if you're $1,000 per kid short, that's about $3 million. What would not be funded that may be funded by Shelby County here at these 4 school sites? And again, that's why a proposed board would need to get a chief school finance officer. There are retirees who would be very willing to come and can have the accounting software and get into this in much greater detail than I can. Timeline. This may be a bummer for you. Let's say I presented the feasibility in June of this year. If you decide to proceed, I would recommend that you get a very well-prepared school board attorney under retainer to operate for the school board. And then in July, the board actually is appointed, and you start trying to hire an interim superintendent. Could be a retiree, could be someone who's unhappy where they've been and they're looking for another job in another place, and it would be fun to start. September, Chief School Finance Officer. I cannot, Kelly, tell you how complicated in the last 12 years it's all been. We have got constantly, the legislature has new line items, special line items of something that a legislator thinks it helps him politically and it helps schools. That complicates the accounting system. Oh, I'm going to show you how much federal money has been dumped into the state. It's just gotten to be, the reporting, the books are extremely complicated. And December, technology. Let me give you the bad news about that. Each local board of education now has to become a complete data center for technology. You've got to link each school, you've got to link classrooms, and you've got to link to the state to report. It is expensive. And James can give you an idea about that, but in the cost we're going to come up with a little bit. Round figure, about $1 million to get all the equipment set up, unless the city has in-kind contributions they can make. And I don't know, I just have to give you a placeholder. That is about a standard number. And moving ahead, when we get down to April, you need somebody. Well, March, curriculum instruction, permanent superintendent, chief school finance officer, federal programs director, special education director, career tech director, director of student services, transportation supervisor. What has the board decided to do on that? Who's going to pay the salary of these people? City council will have to make an appropriation to do that because you're not separated. You're not getting any federal, state, or local money yet. Are you with me? I'm not happy about it, but I just want to make sure I'm not glossing over that. You understand? That's part of the significant cost of getting over the hump to achieve financial separation where you get financial monies coming in to assist. Then, child nutrition program director. And in July, you achieve the first fiscal separation. Do you know what the scholastic year is? July 1, June 30. State fiscal year is October the 1st, September 30th. They're out of sync by 3 months. So when you separate, when you take control of the schools in July of 2025, you're going to accrue payroll on 12-month employees, 11-month employees, and 10-month employees for at least 3 months until you can get into October of the next fiscal year, for which there will be a state appropriation that you will be eligible to participate in and participate in local revenues. City council appropriation, that's totally your business. That has nothing to do with the fiscal years. So that's why we say August the 31st, 2025 would be the last month Shelby County would pay the teachers at those school sites. But wait a minute. You're going to have to open schools at the very end of August, and you're going to have to pay all those teachers and support personnel, school bus drivers, for the month of September out of your pocket. It's not right. It's what it is. I was asked to draft legislation years ago to change our fiscal year to a July 1 for both fiscal and scholastic. The legislature, it's too complicated for them to even think about doing. But that is a real downside to the operation of public education in Alabama. Now, pro forma budget. What do I think it would cost? Well, if you separate this year, July, August, September, you operate the board, superintendent, probably part-time. For this fiscal year, let's say $75,000. That's not much money. That's not a big deal. All right? If you continue and begin to hire these people who have to be in place and assisting the board in formulating the academic and support programs that you've got to have in the schools. Finance officer, technology, O&M, federal programs, C&I, special ed, career tech, student services, transportation department, and child nutrition. And federal programs are reimbursed in arrears. In other words, you got to buy the food and then bill the federal government and hopefully get a reimbursement check the next month. So all of that stuff adds up, and for all of 2025 up until June the 30th, we're looking at about $2 million more. That's because of all the positions. And now the real money comes. July you take over. And you've got to fund all of these offices. And then at the very bottom in September, $2.5 million to make payroll for all of the teachers and support employees. Again, you're not getting any money at that point. So, that's a transient, that's a one-time expenditure. Is it right? No, the state should have done better than this. When Pelham, Alabaster separated, when Orange Beach and Gulf Shores, they all faced this thing, this situation. It wasn't that much money 15 years ago. But you think about the inflation on teacher salaries, general administrator salaries, compensation costs. You've got to pay insurance on the buildings. You've got to pay fuel costs, electricity. It's, you're picking up the whole operation of schools. Is that a disqualifier from the city doing it? No. But I just got to lay out to you, that's what other cities have faced. And when Gulf Shores and Orange Beach separated, it didn't matter to them. Their cities had such big operating reserve funds, they were fine. It wasn't a big deal. That's also why, in most of the studies that I've done in cities that have separated, they've realized that they need some additional revenue. The quicker, if you choose to get additional revenue, the quicker you get it, you're putting it aside for a year later when the big costs occur. You're laying by for the hard times. And there are a lot of people who can tell you about that. Last thing I want to hit you with is that all the federal COVID money that's coming in to 3 different plans totals $3.137 billion of additional money that has been thrown into local school systems budgets. That is why it is almost impossible for me to do as valid a comparison of what your resources would be if you were separated this year compared to other school systems, because they've been polluted, their numbers set with all this additional money that is one time. If it's not obligated by September the 30th, it reverts. So it's going to get spent. The other thing that has happened is extraordinary education trust fund revenues. In 2021, we had $1.3 billion left over in the education trust fund. The next year we had almost $3 billion left over. 2023, we had $2.5 billion left over. For 2024, we're not through yet, but it's estimated by the governor to be about $1.5 billion. And for next year, $8.26 billion. Is the legislature going to make it easy and provide funding for a city who wants to start up for transition costs? I doubt it. Does the state make an annual appropriation to charter schools for startup costs? Yes. So, maybe there could be sought some additional money to assist a startup. The question is political support within a community versus the political support of the county political structure. Is it a burden to Shelby County for you to separate? Yeah. It's going to have to be a lot of readjustment of their transportation, which kids go where. It won't be simple. It never is. On the other hand, I will tell you this like I've told people in Baldwin County. If the growth is in Alabaster and Pelham, by taking those kids away from the county, and as those kids' numbers increase with new annexation and economic development, the capital outlay problem is the cities and the city school board. You with me? Your problem is if you separate and you do get additional growth, you've got to provide for those additional capital needs. The county has been relieved of the financial obligation for capital outlay of the financial operation of the cities, which are revenue generators and which are population generators. So, all in all, it's a mixed bag. It depends on politically what your community, it's a political decision, what you think is worthwhile to attempt for the long-term growth of the city. And that's where every city that I've worked with always has been saying, well, where can we be in 10 years? Research data was done by an economic forecaster. His name is Kayvon Darabi. He's a state expert. He's done studies for some other cities, Gardendale for one, which show that every time a municipality, a city, forms their own separate school system, their growth rate and their wealth increases. In other words, you build it and they will come. The downside is it a financial obligation that the municipality would like to undertake? All right, let me look at my watch clock. My dad was a watchmaker, and he would be ashamed of me. I never was, as a little kid, I always had watches, and nobody else in school had them. I don't wear a watch anymore. I've taken a lot of your time. You have been most kind to be polite. I haven't seen too many scowls or anger. City Council members, thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to come and be with you. And as I've told Seth and Kelly, I'll be available to answer any number of questions. And kind of the ball comes to your court now. There are no significant disadvantages, liabilities, preventing your school system, if created, from being successful that we have found in the most careful screening of all financial, tax data, ad valorem wealth, sales tax information, demographics. There is no disqualifier. The qualifier is separating within the political construct of the future of the city of Calera. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I appreciate all of you coming. I apologize to you for what I've done to you. What I used to teach a finance training course for youth superintendents, state mandated, 8 hours for 3 days. So they didn't like me very much. Ladies and gentlemen, would you like to ask me a question? I see shock, fatigue.
We're going to actually counsel to go ahead and present your question to Mr. Harvey if you have any now. Anybody?
You will have this full PowerPoint that y'all can go through. It goes through chapter by chapter. It gives examples, it gives a little bit of narrative, and it gives a page number where it's found in your report. That'll help. Y'all have got my phone number and my email address.
So no question from anyone? Thank you again for presenting.
Thank you very much for allowing me this
To us.
opportunity. And I thank these people who are kind enough to get out on a Monday night and be abused like this.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Let's see where we are. I think those are last on our agenda. No one have any?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So, thank you. Thank you.